back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan, as always. I think we had like our biggest streams and stuff last week, so if you're around for the second time, welcome back. As always, if you're watching live somewhere, leave a comment. We should be able to see it, and we can engage with you live. Did some stuff happen this weekend, Alan? I don't know. It seemed like a pretty quiet weekend.
Yeah. I went to Greenville, and at some point I drove home, and a few 100,000 thoughts were in my head in between those two things.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's start with women's basketball. We're going to talk the SEC championship that the women won this past weekend. We're going to talk at the end of the men's basketball regular season, set us up for the SEC tournament this coming weekend. And we're going to talk a little baseball too. South Carolina swept the series against Longwood, scored double digits in every game. Still maybe some concerns, but, maybe the bats are rounding into form. And we will preview the SEC schedule getting started this weekend against Ole Miss. So a lot to get to, big show. Let's start with the women. So we thought, I think, after Saturday, that the big headline that we would talk about today would be Camila Cardoso making a walk-off three in the final second against Tennessee in the semifinal game to push South Carolina into the finals. That's her first career make of a three and her first attempted three at South Carolina. Probably riding as high as you can possibly be at that point. And then on Sunday, and we'll talk about both individually here, but then on Sunday, you maybe have one of your lower moments of your career if you're Camila Cardoso, and having those moments back to back is kind of interesting. So South Carolina does win the SEC championship against LSU. A brawl ensued in the final 2 minutes. There's been a lot back and forth on social media about who was in the wrong and whatever. I don't think we condone fighting ever. I certainly think that Dawn Staley handled it much more classy than Kim Mulkey did afterwards. And I think Camila Cardoso gave a classy apology on social media afterwards. But nonetheless, she got ejected for fighting. She will have to sit out the first round of the NCAA tournament. Let's start with the high. Let's go back to Tennessee.
Let's go backwards before we go forwards, yeah.
So that's a game that South Carolina jumped out to a huge early lead to, and Tennessee just slowly crept their way back until it seemed like they were going to send South Carolina packing, give them their first loss of the season. You were courtside for all of that, or you were in the booth for all of that. What'd you see?
All right, I think maybe you set this up first. Is like we talked about. I think I actually said on the show last week, if anyone's beaten them this weekend, it might be Tennessee in the semifinal, just because Tennessee was really the only team that played them close twice in the regular season. They've got the matchup. They've got a WNBA lottery pick with Rickea Jackson, who was, again, for the third time in 3 weeks, brilliant against South Carolina. Offense got a little sloppy down the stretch. Obviously, you couldn't contain Jackson. You're lucky to even be in position for Cardoso to hit a miracle shot because you're down 2 with 4 seconds left. Tennessee misses 2 free throws. You get the rebound. You don't have a timeout. Tennessee has 2 fouls to give, and they foul for some reason. Like, I guess the idea there is like you want it to be so little time on the clock and you make South Carolina inbound it, which they did have to inbound it with 1 second left, but you basically gave them a little time out there, like not a real one. South Carolina didn't have one to call, but you gave them enough time for Dawn to signal a play in, I guess, from the bench.
I also imagine the full court play is a little messier than the half court play.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point too. And that, I mean, she's certainly capable of hitting them. I think she has hit one this year from half court, but that's a full Wiley half court heave if Tennessee doesn't foul. Is South Carolina's best look there. She was at about the mid-court line when she's the one who got fouled. And then they get a chance to inbound. Weird trying to piece it together, like from Dawn in an open locker room. We're told the play was supposed to go to Powell, or maybe that was supposed to go Raven to Powell, but Powell was pretty well covered. You have to assume that's the one player Tennessee's not going to get a shot off in that situation. But also, why would you call a play with a pass with 1 second? You don't have time for that. However it ended up happening, you end up with Camila Cardoso alone outside the three-point line. I've seen people being like, why would Tennessee defend her that way? I get the idea that you can't leave a player that open, let her set her feet, but also if there's one player maybe in the country you'd be fine letting take that shot, it's probably Cardoso. Just an
And she knocks it down.
unbelievable. I
Yeah.
don't use the word fluky because apparently she practices those just in case in practice. But you got your mulligan. I'll just say it that way. You didn't play that well. You were down. You needed your 6'7" center who's never attempted a three in 3 years here to make one at the buzzer. I think that's how you kind of bookend Saturdays. You needed a mulligan and you got it. Is that fair before we move on?
Yeah, we were texting Sunday morning and I called it the most unlikely thing I've seen since we've been covering the
Yeah,
last 2
I'd
years.
agree with that. Yeah.
And yeah, maybe that's even understating it a little bit. When you just give all those factors that you're talking about as far as Tennessee makes one of those free throws, I, it's at least into overtime, but probably the whole situation's completely
Yeah.
different.
They probably foul at three for real, like a couple times to make South Carolina shoot free throws.
Yeah, so very, very, very unlikely, very, very cool. So you went viral pretty much that
Yeah.
day. Everyone, ESPN's talking about you. And then Sunday, you have the rematch set up with LSU, a game that you only won by 6 points in the regular season, the game that everyone wanted to see, the game that the whole country was watching. It lived up to the billing, pretty much. It was a hard fought game back and forth. South Carolina, I feel like, had pretty good control throughout, but obviously was never able to distance himself, um, to a point where it didn't feel like it was a ball game late. And then you have the whole scuffle at 2 minutes. South Carolina is up 7 at that point, I believe. Um, I mean, I guess I'll tell you what I saw on the multiple replays at this point now from the television. Flau'jae Johnson grabbed Malaysia Full Wiley as she was going away. Intentional foul, probably, whatever. And the tempers were already kind of flared at that point. Ashlyn Watkins, I believe, uh, stepped over to Johnson, and Johnson elbowed her like in the head, neck, through an elbow. It wasn't
Yeah.
maybe like whatever, through an elbow. Um, Cardoso, who I've seen a bunch of clips going around social media of some of the abuse I guess she was taking throughout the game. Let her emotions get the best of her in that moment. Kind of ran across the court, knocked down Johnson. Johnson's brother hopped the
That's where it escalates
media
for real.
table.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, I mean, it seemed like he like hopped the media table, then had like a moment of clarity. Like he didn't come too hard after he got over the table or whatever.
I
But
think he
please
saw the
escort him away and
6'7"
hang.
person standing there.
What?
I think he saw the 6'7" person standing
Yeah,
there.
that probably has something to do with it too. She looks a little taller when you're toe to toe with her. But yeah, police escort him away. I think he ended up actually getting formally arrested, which
Yeah.
isn't ideal for anyone.
No.
So yeah, just this really messy scene, pretty much. I thought Dawn Staley handled it pretty well afterwards. She apologized to the nation, tried to speak for Cardoso as best she could, and then Cardoso put out a social media post on, was that yesterday?
It was Sunday night, like late, I
Sunday
think.
night, yeah, with a full apology, and I thought it sounded nice, genuine. On the other side, uh, Mulkey after the game said that she wished she had done that to Angel Reese or something. Like basically, just like
I can't
did
even
not,
believe that. Like, there's so much on. We'll talk about all of it, but
yeah,
a
did not take
player,
the high road.
a coach getting behind the mic and saying someone should have knocked down one of her players is really hard for me to even get my head around, even by Kim Mulkey standards and gestures broadly, kind of what she said in the past. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So, and then I read a really interesting piece in The Athletic this morning that was kind of admonishing the whole thing, said that it's like a stain on the weekend, which should have been a great weekend for the sport. But that like it's not, I don't know, it's not a permanent stain. Like South Carolina goes and wins the national championship 5 years from now, you're probably not thinking about it too much anymore. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a boiling over of a lot of back and forth that's been going on in this rivalry for a long time. Although not to be too much of a fan. It's I don't know how much of a rivalry it is when you win 15 straight, but um, yeah. So anyway, I guess I set the stage. What did you see? How do you feel about the win, and then the impact of all of this on the win?
Yeah, I think I don't even know where I want to start with this. Like, I think you probably what you're quoting there from the Athletic, which I haven't read yet, but that's a good find on your part. That's probably about the right way to take this from a 30,000 foot level. Is that was really bad. That was really ugly. That was really uncomfortable to be in the building for. I guess is maybe one way to put that. I mean, it was the very weird vibe. It was 18 minutes of real time between when the fight broke out and when they actually made calls about it. Very weird. I mean, it felt like 18 hours. Like it was very just long and drawn out. But yeah, I don't think this necessarily means women's basketball is bad and all they do is fight and blah blah. None of that. Like nobody, people who come in with that don't watch the sport, don't listen to what people say. All of that. Let's start with that. I don't think, and I think this is the main thing. I don't think anybody meant anything malicious, truly malicious there, or that anything to get that bad. Like, let's dissect every part of this, right? Full Wiley gets a steal. Flage wraps her up, trying to prevent a fast break. That's a basketball play. It was a little bit harder than usual. It probably would have been an intentional foul if they reviewed it, but that wasn't, I mean, she didn't tackle. It wasn't a football play. Like, that's a basketball play. So that's part one. Watkins goes in to defend her teammate. That's a basketball thing. That happens. Flage with the elbow.
It didn't really do anything. It was just talking, you know?
Yeah, which they've been talking pretty much all game, both ways. Flage with the elbow. That's a little bit much. Probably could have been an ejection too, but it wouldn't have even been the first elbow of the game. Chloe Kitts threw one and didn't get an intentional foul, which I kind of thought she should have. Angel Reese threw one. I don't remember on who. In the second quarter, she did. And this is a separate conversation about actual basketball and how the game was officiated before that, but there were elbows flying all day. So that's that. Cardoso knocks down Flage. Obviously, that's well beyond the bounds of basketball. That's a deserved ejection. That's a deserved 1-game suspension. You can't do that. And I think she knows that. I mean, they're not going to, I certainly wouldn't imagine they're going to lose to a 16 seed because they don't have Cardoso when they beat UConn without her, but she understands what she did and she will have to sit out a tournament game because of that.
Yeah. I did see a lot of outpouring of support from the fan base for her actions there. I can't totally disagree. Like I've played team sports.
Yeah.
If someone takes a cheap shot, sometimes things outside of the rules happen in retaliation. Again, wouldn't encourage it, not praising it, but I can understand why it happened.
I think that's probably about I don't think anybody condones that. I know for a fact Dawn didn't. She said it like 3 times that Cardoso's got to have more control of her emotions in that. And like I said, she's gonna pay for that. She's going to have to sit out an NCAA tournament game for that. There's that, and then obviously where this kind of borders on to the point of surrealism and danger is when a fan jumps in from the stands. I'm not going to comment on Flage Johnson's brother. I don't think that's good for anybody. We don't know that. We don't know. On the other side of the court, whatever. Obviously, a spectator jumping onto the playing surface can't happen. Cops get involved. That's when coaches get in each other's faces, players each other's face. That's where the whole thing kind of escalates for real, which obviously is bad. I don't wish anything bad on Flage Johnson's brother. But I think maybe if you want to try to bring it back to the point, this doesn't go beyond an aggressive basketball scuffle without that, which if you're using this to get after women's basketball or get after South Carolina, get after LSU, anything like that, that's where I think it's wrong, because without a fan jumping onto the court and bringing cops and everything like that, this is just a regular basketball pushing and shoving match, I think. With the Cardoso part, obviously, that part's not regular, but I think that's 90% normal without the inclusion of a fan from the stands. Is that
also, yeah, I agree. And also, to the security at Bon Secours' credit, they reacted very quickly. It did not escalate from there. To the adults on the floor's credit, they separated the teams at that point pretty quickly. It didn't, more shots were not thrown at that point. So like, it was bad. I think it could have been a lot worse, and I
Yes.
think some leveler heads prevailed at a key moment there to make sure that it wasn't worse.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I can't speak for you. I don't know how much of an NBA fan you are, how much you remember this, but we were all thinking Malice at the Palace, right?
Yeah,
Anytime a fan, no, I mean, like anytime a fan and a player are interacting in the middle of a game like that, that's the first thought. Like, and if something like that, I mean, I don't know, were you at the game in, wasn't it the same weekend, ironically, in '04 when South Carolina Clemson football kind of had something similar?
I was at that game actually, and I was 14, so I was like, "Yay, violence!" You know, I certainly didn't have the scope that I have now, but yeah, that was a bad look for the state. Um, I believe both teams were bowl eligible, or
And they didn't
one
go,
of them,
yeah.
and they didn't go. Yeah, that I guess a little bit of that flavor to this as well. But it didn't escalate to either of those, right? Like those were
Yes,
full on,
that's the
like
point. Yeah.
they weren't able to de-escalate the situation. Lots of people injured, lots of really terrible photos and scenes and whatever that still get passed around from all of that. So yeah, I think a blip in the weekend. I think something that's justifiably being talked about across the world right now. But I think something that you can move on from and bounce back from. I don't think that there should be any like further penalties levied. I mean, if the SEC office wants to go back and look at some of the things that led to that, and
I did want to make that. I did want to make a point
comment
on
on them or
that.
something, then
The
I'm for that. But
we were talking about this. Some of the other media there, kind of as everything was, they were trying to sort the whole thing out. The officiating in that game, to me, is what gets it to that point. Like I understand South Carolina and LSU have physical players and they're talented and two of the best teams in the country going at it. Like I get that. The amount of, I mean, you watched the game. The amount of stuff that was let go in that game. I think it was like 6 or 7 minutes in the first quarter before a foul was called either way. And I'll say this: the one thing I think Kim Mulkey was right about was she got up in her presser and said the first, I guess, would have been 8 minutes of the fourth quarter, because happened with 2 minutes to go, was one foul call on each team in 8 minutes. Fourth quarter SEC championship game, two highly physical teams. There's one foul call on each team in 8 minutes. That the officials completely lost control of that both ways. There were several points in that game where just sitting courtside, you're watching, that should be a foul. That should be a foul both ways. I think the one that went viral was Angel Reese kind of pulling Cardoso's hair from behind, like on a rebound attempt, no whistle. I mean, there were that might have been the worst of it, but there were a lot of plays both ways where, I mean, I'm not going to say I thought that was coming because nobody anticipates something like that, but you're watching the officials and how much stuff they're letting go and how many players are getting knocked down. You're like, something's going to boil up here eventually. So I think the officials take a huge amount of responsibility for losing control of that game early. And just obviously at that point, you can't get it back.
yeah, no, I have to agree. I think if they sort of nip that in the bud earlier, then you probably don't see it escalate to the point. Maybe you do. I don't know. They're two competitive teams. They very much don't like each other. They're very much, we're in a championship game mindset. And yeah, I think Don said something to the effect on the TV at the end of the game that like you don't want that to happen, but it's understandable. Like you're in a hot, ratcheted up environment, and the refs didn't do them any favors to ratchet it back down.
No, not at all. And I'm very curious. I mean, you're probably not getting a rematch at this point. I would assume the committee is going to try to keep them separated as long as possible. A, because what happened, and B, because they're in the same conference. But if
I don't
somehow you
know
get
though. I don't know if I don't know if you're cynical enough. I think that would make some for some really good TV ratings. So they might try to.
well, I do think you're probably right about that. But just from the sense of two teams in the same conference being a
Yeah,
1 and 2 seed, they won't put them together. It'd be in the Final Four if it happened again.
right.
But if that happened again, or even next season, although there won't be any Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso, it'll be kind of different players next year. How these games are officiated moving forward, or how any big games involving physical teams are officiated moving forward. Everyone needs to, I think maybe we'll just leave it here. Everybody needs to learn from this. That's something Dawn said. I think Kim might have said it too. everybody needs to learn a lesson from this. That's South Carolina. That's LSU. That's the officials. That's the SEC, the NCAA, everybody. And I hope they do, because that was a really great basketball game for 38 minutes. And that's the only thing you can talk about now is what happened there.
Yeah, a couple more like real life impacts. There was a brief moment. So I guess I didn't mention this when I was breaking it down, but pretty much both benches got ejected except for Sanaya Fagan and Tina Pau because she was sitting at the scorer's table when it happened. So it all happened right in
Was
front
that
of her.
why? They never even said that in the arena.
Yeah, she was already sitting at the scorer's table. So I mean, the fight came to her pretty much in that scenario. But anyway, we had a brief moment where we were like, wait, are they about to have 6 players in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and as LSU about to have 5 in the first round of the NCAA tournament? We got clarification pretty quickly after that Cardoso is the only one that'll miss the first round because she got ejected for fighting. All the other ejections for clearing the bench won't serve that 1 game penalty. So that would have been really interesting. It would have even the playing field a little bit against a 16 seed to see them have to only have 6 players. But yeah, so Cardoso is the only one that'll sit. We'll find out who that opponent is this Sunday, just like we will find out the opponent for men's basketball this Sunday. I believe you said 6 and 8 p.m. respectively.
Yep. Yeah, that was in the arena, just not having access to the broadcast or listening to it. That was talk about panic from everybody involved. Just like South Carolina and LSU media, just kind of doing the mental math. Like, if that's right, I don't care who you're playing, 16 seed, probably 15 in LSU's case, you're not winning a tournament game with 5 players. Like, you're probably just not. Like, I think people were for a second thinking that both those teams' seasons were going to end as a result of this fight.
Yeah, there was definitely that thought flashed through my mind. So glad that wasn't the case. I don't think that would have been the punishment meeting the crime.
No, not at all.
There. So I'm glad that didn't work out. Anything else on the actual game? I mean, you won an SEC title.
Cool. It does kind of feel like it is a real shame we have to talk about the fight for, what are we at, 22 minutes now? Because that was a great basketball game. We didn't even said her name yet, other than the fact that she had the steal that started the whole thing. But Malaysia Fulwiley scored 24 points off the bench, a career high in a conference championship game. Outside shots, going to the rim, defending pretty well. That is a superstar. I think we've talked about her before she even got here, we talked about her on shows last year. But that's a superstar. That's a weapon in the tournament. That's everything you thought she was going to be and more. And I think that's what, at least I can't speak for anybody else. That's what I had written. That's the game story I had written before I had to delete the whole thing with 2 minutes left, was about Fulwiley and kind of how well she played and what that means going forward.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you had 2 classics back to back on Saturday and Sunday. Hopefully, those will be the memories from this time. And yeah, I mean, those will be playing on SEC Network for months, years. Maybe they'll delete the fight. I don't know.
I was going to say, Cardoso shot, yes. I feel like the fight probably won't see the light of day. I think Greg Sankey's probably shoving that into a box in Birmingham right now.
Yeah, definitely. Let's transition a little bit into the men's team. So they finished their season with another thriller. Like, was that Saturday?
That was Saturday,
I got very confused this weekend. So if you were keeping up with us on GamecockScoop.com, me and Alan were covering all of the games all weekend. And on Saturday was kind of the apex of that, where the men's basketball game was going on, the women's game started, and the baseball game started before the men's game was over. So we were like, I had 3 screens up trying to just keep everything going. But anyway, the men had an absolute classic, went into overtime, and it was one of the weirdest close games I've ever seen. South Carolina led. It was something like they led or tied 44 minutes and what's minus 17 43 seconds. 44 minutes and 40. They either led or tied 43 minutes and 43 seconds of the 45 minutes of the game and overtime. Mississippi State only led for 17 seconds of the entire game, and yet it was super close throughout. You were biting your nails throughout, went into overtime, stayed close throughout the overtime. But ultimately, South Carolina pulls off the win. And in typical Gamecock fan fashion, you sat and watched every team that you needed to lose the rest of the day proceed to win, sometimes in crazy fashion. Alabama won in overtime against Arkansas. Actually, I guess Vanderbilt pulled off an upset, but it didn't ultimately matter against Florida. Anyway, so you end up with the 5th seed. You miss out on the first round bye of the SEC. Any thoughts on just the game itself and the way that the regular season ended before we start to preview this weekend?
Yeah. I didn't watch a ton of the men's game Saturday in Greenville and trying to deal with everything that's happened in the Tennessee game. But I think that kind of speaks volumes about this team. That's just a gritty win. Like, that's a on the road against a Mississippi State team that is fighting for its life right now. I think Lenardi has Mike as the last team in going into Nashville. Against a team that objectively needed that game a lot more than you did on their home floor. You knew that you were going to get their best punch. You got the game to overtime. You found a way to get it done. That's kind of this team in a nutshell, right? Just kind of finding different ways to win. I think we talked about that even like in non-con play before we knew how good they were, that they've got some different ways to get things done. And BJ Mack, was it 25 on Saturday? Huge game from him. That's a really good sign going into postseason play. And on the double bye thing, I mean, it sucks. There's no way around it. You didn't lose many games this year, but you lost to 2 of the other 3 teams you were tied with in that 4-way tie, that lost to Alabama, that lost at Auburn. It sucks. It's disappointing, but I think the way you got to look at it is like, you don't need Nashville. You're going to the tournament. You're going to be a 5 or a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament probably. You obviously want to get some postseason experience in Nashville, but you kind of don't even need the SEC tournament, which how many times has this program been in that position?
Very, very, very rarely. Yeah, and we'll talk more about the tournament here in a second. As far as the game itself, yeah, BJ Mack had a really nice bounce back game. He had been struggling the last few games, and yeah, game high 25 points. You don't win that game without him. He made some key free throws down the stretch, some key layups down the stretch. He was always there when you need him. Colin Murray Boyles, huge game. Really, both. It was a battle of freshmen. So Mississippi State's freshman Joshua Hubbard, incredible. He scored 28 points. Seemed to always have a 3 in his pocket when they needed it. I saw that he's been averaging 28 points per game now for 6 straight games.
Yeah.
That's a dude to look out for if he somehow comes back next year. I don't know if he will or he won't, but if he does, both he and Colin Murray Boyles, I think, will be 2 of the talk of the town heading into next offseason for sure. You did a pretty good job of defending against Tolu Smith. He only had 2 points at halftime. He did ultimately end up getting to like 11-ish, I think, but kind of made them one-dimensional. And Hubbard still almost beat you by himself, but you made him try to beat you by himself, and he came up a little short. He ended up actually missing a couple of free throws. A couple of 3-pointers down the stretch that could have kept it closer, but South Carolina was able to pull away. It was a fun game, really exciting. Some other aftermath from that game. So yesterday we learned that the SEC coaches voted Lamont Paris as the coach of the year. Michi Johnson and Talon Cooper were second team All SEC, and Colin Murray Boyles was on the freshman team. And then this morning we got word that the AP voted Lamont Paris SEC coach of the year too. So he wins both. Well deserved. I don't see how there was an argument for anyone else, really.
I don't think you could even do anything. Apparently, I'm reading the email now. Apparently, Lamont was not unanimous for the AP. I don't know who else a vote would have even came for. Because it has listed like Connect was unanimous player of the conference year, unanimous all first team. So it lists what is unanimous and what's not. And apparently, someone in the Associated Press had someone other than Lamont as SEC coach of the year. I don't really.
Someone not paying attention.
Yeah, I think he should probably be national coach of the year. I don't know if he's going to get that. Obviously, a lot more competition out there than that, but
there's some fun stats, right? The single biggest turnaround in school history, and I think he did it by like 4 games, 3 or 4 games, from going from 11 wins to 25 or 26. I can't even.
I mean, the program record for wins in the year is 26, right? Even in the Final Four year. I believe that it is. So
So
I'm
so
looking it
many
up now.
stats been bouncing around in my head all weekend.
I'm
I
pretty sure
don't know
it's
which way is up
26, so you'd
anymore.
have a chance to tie that if you can win again. And speaking of winning again, so we'll set up this week in Nashville for you guys. You did get one by finishing outside the bottom four, but not the two. So Vanderbilt is going to play Arkansas on, I guess, tomorrow. And then the winner of that game between Vandy and Arkansas will play South Carolina at about 3:30 Thursday afternoon. It's 30 minutes after the first game ends, and that first game's at 1 Eastern. So 3:30-ish. South Carolina gets Vanderbilt or Arkansas. Then if you win that, you get the Auburn rematch at the same time on Friday. How do we feel about the draw for the conference tournament?
It's definitely tough. I think of the bottom four seeds, Vanderbilt and Arkansas are probably playing their best basketball right now. They just came off of Arkansas came off of a close loss in overtime against Alabama. Vanderbilt coming off of a win against Florida, pretty improbable win for them. I would probably pick Arkansas to win that game, but who knows? I mean, Vanderbilt maybe is getting hot right now or whatever. So either way, you got a pretty tough first matchup, but a winnable one. And then you're on the same side of the bracket as Auburn and Tennessee, which is pretty tough. I mean, I think based on not playing at Auburn, you feel like you have a
Right.
shot there. And then obviously you've gone 1-1 versus Tennessee and lost in pretty close fashion just last week to them. So you feel like you have a shot there. I don't think that I don't think it's an impossible path, but it's not the best path.
Yeah, I think, and maybe the better question is, I mean, the obvious is no injuries. That's a given. But other than that, what do you want to see out of the conference tournament for this team when you already know they're getting a bid? And unless they like ran through and won the thing, they probably aren't helping their seed line that much this week. What do you kind of want to see out of however many games they play in Nashville?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, with the like rest note and the idea that unless you win the whole thing, which I'm sure they're going to try to win the whole
Sure,
thing,
yeah,
obviously, but unless you win the whole thing, you might be better off with a little bit of rest. Probably win the first game because that's the game you should win
yep,
and make it look good against Auburn. But you know, obviously, the team itself wants more than that.
sure.
Just if I'm being practical, I think just playing Auburn close would feel good heading into the tournament after the shellacking you took from them earlier in the season.
I think I would say that's probably fair. Definitely, you want to win that first game against maybe a 12 or a 13 seed. Just get some good vibes, get some postseason feel. Um, get a chance to kind of feel what it's like to play two games. And you get 2 and 3 days in the NCAA. This would be 2 and 2, but that kind of postseason game recovery, postseason game again sort of feel. Just get 2 of those under your belt. I think would be good for this team. And just to get a win. I mean, they've gone one and done the SEC tournament last year. Frank's last year,
It
21
was
too, I think. Like,
it was a bugaboo throughout Frank's tenure here.
yeah.
Just
So just get in
even on
there.
his good seasons, they
Yeah.
struggled in the tournament. So right now, if we're looking at bracketology, South Carolina is projected as of this morning. Yeah, this morning at 6:30, a 5 seed in Salt Lake City against a 12 seed Grand Canyon, who they played
Yeah.
and beat earlier this year. And their second round matchup would be Kansas or Samford, which Samford's a dangerous
13.
squad
I
right
was going to
now.
say, I don't know if you watched that last night, that
Yeah,
title game, but that's they're going to make a 4 seed uncomfortable next week. I feel like whoever it is.
yeah, definitely. So that has them in the East region, which ultimately would end up in Boston. But obviously, a long way to go from there. We'll find out officially on Sunday. Some of what happens this coming weekend is definitely going to have an impact on
Sure.
all of that seeding. But
Yeah, I would say you're a 5 or a 6 seed probably almost no matter what. And that's a dangerous spot to be. You're talking about like the top of the mid majors, usually around that lines, or the bubble teams who snuck in from power conferences on the 11 sometimes. So that is kind of a dangerous spot to be, but also I don't think anybody wants to play South Carolina right now. So enjoy it. It's fun. It has happened to this program in a while. You're going to turn on your TV at 6 o'clock on Sunday, and they're going to announce a bracket. And at some point on that show, you're going to see a little Gamecock logo pop up with a little location for a tournament game.
which is not something I think any of us would have
Yeah.
projected preseason, even if we did. If you go back, we were like 14th. I don't know about 14th, right? Like that felt low. That felt like a slap in the face. All the things that Lamont Paris has said. But even in our like most optimistic projections, we definitely didn't envision this.
Yeah, for sure. Just enjoy it. Enjoy Nashville if you're going. This is the best time of year if you're a basketball fan. I saw it was the third time ever that an SEC school had both the coaches of the year, Don Saley and Lamont Paris. So these are the good times right now, at least on the hardwood.
Hey, we'll take whatever good news we can get, right?
Yeah,
All right, so we'll have plenty of coverage starting on that
Thursday. Yeah.
Thursday game. Sorry, yeah, I was about to say Friday. Thursday game around 3:30 Eastern or so, like Alan said, and we'll keep coverage as long as they're in it. And we also will be covering baseball this weekend, which gets kicked off with the SEC play against Ole Miss. This past weekend, I don't know that there's a ton of takeaways, but I do have a couple. I covered all three of those games this weekend while you were in Greenville. The they scored double digits in every single game, but it still didn't look very good really until Sunday. They still left a lot of runners in scoring position, still seem to be lacking clutch hitting. The thing that kind of saved them throughout the series and really exploded in a major way on Sunday was they're still earning walks. They're still battling at the plate. Going into the weekend, they were actually tied with Ole Miss, who they'll play this weekend, for the most walks as a team, and now they're 10 ahead of them coming out of the weekend, and they're number one by themselves. Just if you didn't watch any of it, that lets you know how bad the pitching at times was for Longwood. Sunday in particular, they just couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. The pitchers really couldn't. It actually was a pretty competitive game through four. It was tied 6-6, and then South Carolina had a never-ending, what was the sixth inning, I believe. They scored 11 runs.
I think. It was like from the middle of the second quarter of the women's game, end of that, all a halftime, and like to the first media timeout of the third quarter. Was that sixth inning? I was just tracking it while I was there.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number of batters, but I want to think it was like 16 or something. And there were some clutch hits in there. I guess another headline is Cole Messina's bat finally started to come alive. He started the series batting 180 something on the year, and I think ended in the 250 range. So he had a really nice weekend. You actually on Sunday in that big explosion didn't get a ton out of your 1, 2, and 3 hitters, but your 4, 5, and 6 hitters just were unstoppable. So it's good to see the bats wake up. It's good to see names that you thought you were going to depend on preseason start to make an impact. Now it starts to count this coming weekend. I think so. You have to travel to Ole Miss, and if we're breaking down that game a little bit, or that series a little bit, it seems like they have maybe a little bit of a pitching depth issue. I haven't looked a ton into it yet. It's Tuesday. I'll do a deeper dive later in the week, but it seems like they have a little bit of a pitching depth issue. They've lost some back end games in some series, but they also have scored a lot of runs, and they've also put together a lot of walks. So I think they're a dangerous team offensively as well.
Yeah, I think they set up kind of similarly to how you set up. If you just kind of compare rosters, compare numbers right now. They played Iowa, who I guess that's their best series so far. They were ranked for a little bit, I think. They took 2 out of 3 in that series, so I guess that's something. But I think maybe the way you look at it going into this weekend, this maybe isn't fair for week 1 of conference play, but for a team that they're 14-3, but they're 0-2 against Power 5 opponents. Played Clemson twice, lost twice, 2 run games. We had that whole discussion last week on the show. You can go back and listen to that. You need something. You need some proof of concept here against an SEC opponent, a Power 5 opponent, or something. Ole Miss is not Vanderbilt. Ole Miss is not Florida. Ole Miss is not LSU. It's a road SEC series. It's going to be tough. I'm not saying you should walk in there and run rule them 3 times, but if you're as good as you think you are, as good as we thought you could be, this is not the toughest series on your schedule. This is probably not even in the top half of your toughest SEC series. Go there and take 2 out of 3, get some good vibes in motion, kind of validate some of the stuff we're talking about how maybe the offense is fixed. Is that fair, or is that too harsh for week 1 of conference play?
No, I think, you just need to see those bats continue to improve against better pitching than you saw this past weekend. You need to see that runners in scoring position stat continue to creep up. And that just requires, some clutch hitting. They even early in the series this past weekend, they left bases loaded 3 or 4 times across Friday and Saturday. And finally, those started to drop in on Sunday. You've done a good job of getting on base. You haven't done a great job of scoring people once you get them on base. So that's the next component for sure.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Got a midweek tonight against Georgia State. Last little tune up there, and then it's all about Ole Miss. And you're into this grind, this 30 games, 10 weekends, SEC, no breaks from here. I think it's kind of cliche or stating the obvious, but I think we're about to figure out how good this team is, or if this team's not good, what that might mean.
Yeah. We'll have full coverage of that this weekend as well. Alan and I will be tag teaming it again for as long as the men stay alive in Nashville. And the only football notes, really, the spring practice schedule and spring roster just dropped. There will be a press conference from Beamer and an assistant coach every Tuesday starting next Tuesday. So we'll have some coverage of those on GamecockScoop.com. If you want to check out the new roster numbers and stuff, Gamecocks Online has the full rosters. I can post those on the Insiders Forum on GamecockScoop.com as well. Recruiting wise, David Sanders Jr., who is the number 2 overall recruit in the 2025 class, 5-star offensive lineman out of Providence Day School in Charlotte, has set his first official visit, and it's to South Carolina. So that's a good sign. I actually have an article on the front page from Adam Freeman talking about a couple of other Eastern recruits, big names that have kind of started to set their visit schedules. So you can check that out if you're a premium subscriber on GamecockScoop.com. Yeah, I think that's all I got right now. We got another crazy week coming up, another crazy weekend coming up, and you should definitely tune in on GamecockScoop.com for our live threads. Come ask questions, come hang out, and we'll be back here next week to digest everything that happened. And I will be 1 year older as of Sunday, so well, maybe wiser, probably not, but we'll see.
You have a St. Patrick's Day birthday? I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
you had a Selection Sunday birthday this year.
That's right. That's more important than St. Patrick's Day.
No Gamecocks on St. Patrick's Day. There's going to be 2 of them on Selection Sunday.
That's
a
right.
Men's and a women's bracket.
Until next week, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you later.